Again, appreciate everybody being here. This is the second module or the second session of our series on fixing your credit reports. And what I want to do is, let me see if I can do, we're going to try a new feature here, a poll. So let me know. Hopefully this will pop up here. So that's here live, I don't think this comes up on a replay, but who was able to either watch Module 1 live or on replay? And if you'll just let me know, hopefully everybody had a chance, but if you did not, I will definitely get you a replay link for the first module, because that's really sort of an important foundation to be able to pull your credit reports the right way, save them the right way, get them from the right place. And we have to have that to get going. Now, if I see at least one person was not able to watch that first session, you can still, I think, get a lot of value out of this. Just make sure you go back and watch that first session. If you do not have an email from me with that and the attachments or the handouts, just email me and I'll get that to you. And let me pop in my email address. This will be the easiest one to remember. And let's see. So I have one more little question here for you guys. And this is, were you able to pull the reports from Annual Credit Report? Occasionally we have, some trouble doing that. And I'm just wondering how many of you were able to pull those. Looks like so far, a pretty good percentage were able to pull from annualcreditreport.com. Remember, in the first module, we did have some workarounds. If you can't get them from annualcreditreport.com, you can go to myequifax.com, Experian.com. Those are all free. Go to TransUnion, you have to pay for it. Or Credit Karma. It's not exactly your real reports, but it's pretty good. And that will have Equifax and TransUnion. So it looks like about 2/3 of people were able to pull. So that's good. That's good. All right. So let's get into the presentation here. And we're starting kind of simple. The first module was, hey, let's pull our credit reports. This module is dispute biographical information. I'll have more to say about that. But I just want to remind us that when we learn something, we tend to go from what we know to something that's unknown. So if you remember learning multiplication, or maybe recently you've been teaching your kids multiplication, we say 2 times 2 is like 2 plus 2, because the kid knows 2 plus 2. Okay. And we say, all right, well, what's 2 times 4? Well, that's like 2 plus 2 plus 2 plus 2. Okay. So we go from the known to the unknown. So as we think about biographical information, I want you to understand kind of the purpose behind doing this. First of all, you want this information to be correct. Okay. There's no reason to have incorrect personal or biographical information. It can mess you up getting a home loan, getting a job, security clearance. Okay. You want it to be accurate. So you want to dispute the inaccurate information. And if they don't fix it, then you look at suing the credit bureaus, even on this biographical information. And if you sue them, they tend to fix it. The other thing they tend to do, if you have a legitimate lawsuit brought in the right way, they tend to come to us and say, hey, how do we make this go away? Well, there's got to be money paid, and you've got to do this, this, and this on my credit report. So it can give you leverage over the credit bureaus. And the final thing is, it just gives us some momentum, okay? If we can learn how to analyze our credit report on the biographical information, and then next week will be on public records, which is basically bankruptcy, and inquiries. Then when we get to the hard part, which are the accounts that are negative, now we know how to do it. I feel confident there's somebody on this webinar right now that's saying, yeah, but I want to know about, this Bank of America account. It's been charged off 5 years ago. The state I'm in has a 4-year statute of limitation. The state where I was in when I took it out has a 3-year, and it has a choice of law provision that says 7 years. So can I dispute the date of last activity being 6 months ago? It's like, well, wait a minute. We're in sort of, high level algebra or trigonometry. We got to like build up to that. Okay. So we'll talk about this biographical information. Let me just see here. Check the comments real quick. Sometimes David says Equifax doesn't like me. Courtney asked about name change. We're going to definitely talk about that. Okay, so let's think about what our biographical information is. What I have in the blue, that's sort of who you are. Okay, and in the green, these are things connected with you. So, we have a name. Now we may have multiple names that we use. Okay, but we do have a name. We have hopefully just one date of birth, and we should just have one social security number. But now we'll have lots of addresses, phone numbers, places of employment. And so that's what we're looking at here. So let me give you sort of a visual illustration. And by the way, feel free to take notes, but anything I put on the screen, that in terms of like, well, here's what we would do with the letter, I'm going to actually give you the letter, or I'll give you the tools here. So I just want you to visualize this. Imagine all the personal information on your credit report. Those are all on pieces of paper, and you sit down at a table and you just dump all those pieces of paper on the table. And then you organize them like, here's all my names, here's my date of birth, social security, my addresses, all this stuff. Well, then what do we do with it? Well, we get everything that is on each of those areas. Again, name, date of birth, social, place of employment, address, phone numbers, and we list all that. And then we pick up each piece of paper, each piece of data, and we say, is this correct now? If it is, we put it in the bucket that says correct now. All right. Then we pick up the next piece of paper. Is this correct now? Well, we might say it used to be correct. Okay. So this used to be my name. This used to be my address. This used to be the place where I worked, but now it's no longer accurate. So we put that in a different bucket. So we've got one bucket that this is correct. The second bucket is it used to be correct, but now it's wrong. Well, we may pick up a piece of paper or we look at this data. Okay, so for example, my name is John G, as in Griffin, Watts. Okay, and it may say John G. Walls, W-A-L-L-S. Well, that's never been my name. So I look at this piece of paper, this piece of data, and I stick it in the bucket that says this was never correct. It's always wrong. They have my social security number wrong. Well, there's only been one social security number. That goes in this bucket. So again, you put everything on the table, and we're going to use a Word document just because it's very easy. And I'll give you that Word document. And we just look at each piece of data and say, is this correct now? Well, then it goes in that bucket. Is this wrong, but it used to be correct? Well, that goes in a different bucket. Or this was never right. It's always been wrong. It goes in this third bucket. And so what do we do with that? Well, once we have all that data that's on our tool, okay, and this will be a Word document, now we can start writing the dispute letter. Again, I'll give you all this. I just want you to see this. And let me check the comments here. So David asked about maiden names, married names. So yeah, we're going to look at all that. And Joseph says, experience tells me I can't remove prior addresses reported by credit. Yeah, that's not correct. And so Joseph was able to handle that. And so again, I want you to see the dispute letter, and then we'll go back and we'll actually pull up the tool. You'll download the tool, then I'll pull up the dispute letter in a Word document. You'll download that. So here's kind of the basic pattern. We say to the credit bureaus, look, I want my information to be accurate. Here's the only correct information. Now, I have this as sort of one thing. My name is, well, you may have several versions of your name you use. So let's say I'm John G. Watts III. Well, that may be my legal name, but maybe I just go by John G. Watts. Well, then I would list both of those, okay? But I just have this as if there's one. So, if you can see, I don't know if my cursor is showing up here. Well, let me put it over here. Here's my name. Here's my date of birth, my social, my address, phone number, place of employment. So this is the correct bucket, okay? Now, let's look at this used to be correct, but now it's wrong. So we say, hey, my name used to be, but I don't go by that name anymore. So it may be a maiden name that I no longer use. Well, then that would be listed here. Now, if I use sort of my married name and my maiden name, well, then I would have that on the previous screen. Those are my correct names, okay? But maybe you say, I haven't used this name in 5 years, okay? Or I moved 5 years ago, okay? So we've got in here the addresses. And then we explain why we don't want these old addresses on here, right? Because we don't want like a pre-approved offer going to them. We don't want somebody pulling our credit report, seeing this old address and mailing something important. I don't know who lives there. You know, the time to forward the mail is gone, okay? Same thing with phone numbers. I don't want somebody calling a landline I had 10 years ago. That's crazy, okay? And same thing with work. Why would I want somebody contacting an employer that I had 5 years ago, that I left 5 years ago, okay? So again, this is the bucket that is, it used to be correct, but now it's not correct, okay? Now, let's look at kind of to finish this up. These are the items that were never correct, okay? My name was never John G. Walls, W-A-L-L-S, okay? You know, my social security number was never blah, 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 blah. I never lived in Portland, Maine, or Portland, Oregon, or New York City, okay? I never had these phone numbers. I never worked at these places. So you see these three buckets. Yeah, this is correct. That's what I want. These used to be correct, but now they're no longer correct, so I want you to get rid of them. And these were never correct at all. I want you to get rid of these. And so let's look now at, let me check out the chats here. Tony asked about sending money, very valuable information. I'm glad you found it or finding it valuable. You don't need to send any money. The point of this is so that you guys can do this on your own. You can do your own disputes. And then if it turns out that the credit bureaus won't fix things, then part of what we'll do in this training session, will be the last session, is how do you know when to sue? How do you find the right lawyer? And look, if you decide you want to talk to me then, that's great. Again, I don't want your money at that point because we're going to be suing the bad guys and making them pay you money and me money. So we'll all be happy about that. Let's see. Kate mentions have phone numbers I don't even recognize. Michael says, what would you list for true self-employed? I would just put self-employed. You know, I would just do that. You know, if it's sort of a sole proprietor or doing business as type of thing. And so let's think about where we are now, okay? So we know how to organize this data. Again, correct now, not correct, but used to be correct, and never was correct. Now we just need to tell the credit bureaus that, okay? And then that gives us momentum because we'll have taken part of our credit reports and figured out exactly what to dispute. We'll have written the dispute letter. And then next session, we'll go into bankruptcies. And that may not apply to everybody, but everybody has inquiries. We'll cover that. And then again, we'll get more momentum as then we roll into the part that probably everybody is most interested in. And that is, how do we look at negative accounts and find the errors? But again, we won't be starting with sort of, you know, algebra 2. And look, if you're an engineer or math major, maybe like, hey, algebra 2 was easy. Well, for most of us, it was a little challenging. Okay, so let's start with addition, subtraction, you know, before we get into multiplying, you know, improper fractions or whatever that stuff is. All right, so let's look at this tool. I want to show it to you, and then I'll have you download it. So let me see if I can switch my screen. So you should be able to see this biographical dispute tool. Can everybody see this? This is a Word document. Hopefully this is showing up on my screen here. Okay, so I've got some yes, so that's good. So look, what we're doing with this is if you have the PDFs of your credit reports, that makes it easy. And like if you have two screens, that's nicer. If you have one screen, you know, you just got to kind of flip back and forth. but you literally are just like highlighting, copying and pasting something from, your TransUnion report, your Equifax report, your Experian report, all the names, for example, and you just paste them in here. So I'm just going to type them, okay? But let me just sort of show you the concept here. So, we've got John G. Watts, we've got John Watts, we've got Jon Watts, we've got Jon Walls, John White. I'll tell you this, when I was a kid, I always wondered why my dad, every time he like called in something or we were ever with somebody and they said, "What's your name?" he would say David Watts, Watts. And that just became such a habit that when I became an adult, I always spelled out my name. And one day I thought, why am I doing this? So I stopped doing it. And I would go to like pick up the pizza and I'd say, I'm here to pick up pizza. They say, "Well, what's your name?" I say, "John Watts." They go, "We don't have an order." I'm like, "Yeah, I called it in." Yeah, we have an order for John White or John Wyatt or John Walls, and I just figured out for some reason, nobody can understand it. And then as I've had clients over the years, no relation to me, but with the same last name, I'm like, "Hey, do you spell out your name?" They're like, "Yeah, nobody can get it right." So these are all names that I have had. And so if these are on my reports, I would just list all of these. You just want to gather them all on the table, okay? And then say, okay, what's correct? Well, really, these two are correct. So I would just sort of copy and paste these in here, okay? Sometimes I use John Watts. And when I say use, I mean, what I don't want to do is I tell Discover Card my name is John Watts, and then I'm disputing just John Watts. Well, that wouldn't be fair to the credit bureaus, okay? So if I regularly use a name, well, then unless I'm going to stop using that name and like go change it with Discover Card, then I need to be consistent with that. If my driver's license says John G. Watts the third, well, if I never use the third, then I shouldn't be telling the credit bureaus that, hey, this is the only one I want you to use. Okay. So we have to be fair when we're doing this. But I use both of these names, so that would be fine. Now, which name was wrong, but it used to be correct? Well, none of these for me, okay? How about which ones were never correct? They were always wrong. Well, it would be all these. And so we're just copying and pasting these in here and say, okay, now I have a list of my names here. And so when I go to write the dispute letter, this becomes very easy. So let's think about, date of birth ought to be pretty easy, right? There hopefully is just one on there. I have seen multiple of those. So, same thing with Social Security number. Let's take addresses, okay? So let's say I live at 123 Main Street and they have 789, Smith Avenue, and then there's 567 Kentucky Street, and you get the picture, okay? And I say, well, this is where I live now, this 123 Main Street. So that's what I want listed, okay? Remember in our slides, the first slide was, here's what's correct now, here's what used to be correct, but not now, and here's what was never correct. And I say, well, look, I lived at 789 Smith Avenue. So here's where you have to use some judgment, okay? So how long ago did I move from 789 Smith Avenue? If it was a week ago, I probably shouldn't be disputing that, okay? What if it was a month ago? Well, probably not. I would say, and this is just sort of my own personal rule of thumb, if it's within the last 2 years, I don't worry about trying to get that deleted, okay? And so if this was, a year ago, then I might say, I might list it down here, but I would change the letter to say, but this is okay, or maybe I just wouldn't bring it up at all. But let's say that this is, 3 years ago. Well, then I'm definitely going to put that there. And now, this 567 Kentucky Street, I say, I never lived there. So again, that would go here. So hopefully you see the pattern. Is this making sense? Here's what's correct now. Here's what used to be correct, but it's wrong now. And here's what was never right. Okay, so that's good that this is making sense. So And you can imagine you can do that with phone numbers. Now, again, you may have multiple phone numbers. You may say, well, I've got a cell phone, I've got a home phone. So you can have more than one sort of correct now. But, seriously, it's like, why is there a landline when I sold my house a decade ago? I have no idea where that landline, it's not like that landline stayed with my house. I have no idea where it goes. Why would I want that on here? Okay. Now, again, if Discover Card has that landline from 10 years ago, I need to fix it with Discover Card first, okay? And then dispute that on my credit reports, because we don't want the credit bureaus to say, well, let me go back to a creditor and see if this is still the number you have listed, okay? And so that's the tool. Let me go back to our slides here and get this to pop up. All right, so now let's go through the dispute letter. Let me pull that up for us. All right, so here's the dispute letter. And when I get done showing this, then I'll do the PDF or the Word documents for you guys to download. I don't know why when it downloads from this webinar software, it has a very odd title to it. It's just, I gave it a normal title, but that's just how it does. So let me show you the structure of this. So we put the date, certified mail. Now, verify these addresses, okay? So these are accurate as of today, but maybe they're changing them right now. They very rarely change them, but they have changed them in the past, okay? So you always want to verify. Just go to, if you type in this address, okay? So, this Experian, P.O. Box 4500, Allen, Texas. If you just drop that into a search bar, on Google Chrome or whatever, it should pop up and they'll say, here's where you send this. Then just make sure you're at Experian, you're at Equifax, you're at TransUnion. Now, I listed Innovis and SageStream, okay? If you remember from the last session, those are not required, but they're nice bonus ones to get if you happen to have them, put them in there. And so, look, very simple letter. There's nothing magical about this letter. And actually, let me go back here to the slide because I want to show you something here. Just and for emphasis sake, I want you to see this on the screen as well as hear me. There are no magic dispute letters, okay? When people say, oh, I've got this magic dispute letter, they're selling you something, okay? Just trust me, there are no magic dispute. I have been doing this for over 20 years, okay? I train lawyers how to do this. I've had hundreds and hundreds of clients that we help with this. There are no magic dispute letters, okay? The idea is you get the letter to the bureaus and you make it understandable. That's really it. You're very specific in what's wrong, specific in what you want them to do. So there is nothing magical about it, okay? These are just some letters or a way that we find to be helpful here. And so let me go back to this letter. So I like to make it easy to read, okay? So I'm disputing false information on my credit reports. I want you to delete all the inaccurate information, okay? I do that because I want it to be easy for the credit bureaus. I'm not trying to trick the credit bureaus. Trust me, you don't need to trick them. When you make it just super simple, they'll still mess it up a lot of the times. And remember, the goal of this training is not to say, well, how do we do credit repair and get the most things removed? No, it's how do we dispute inaccurate information? So either they fix it or we sue them, okay? So it's a different model than say, well, I'm just going to pound them with letters for months after months after month. No, this is let's do a proper dispute letter. And if they don't fix it, then we're in a position to sue. And so we want even the judge reading this letter go, wow, this is very clear. This is very simple. So we've got on here, I've got this biographical information. Here's the correct information. Okay, my name is, my date of birth. See, it's just very simple. Again, we're not trying to hide it or confuse it. Correct address. Now, obviously, if you have more than one phone number, you've got to change. You say the only correct phone numbers are, so just, work with this. But going back up here, I have this in red and yellow. I'll tell you a funny story. We have a dispute letter that for many years we've had our clients and just anybody that wants it to use to deal with a debt collector. And we had in there, here's my phone number. don't call my cell phone number of, XXX-XXX, and if you think I gave you permission, I'm revoking it. So, people send those out, the companies continue to call, and then we sue them under various laws. Well, as one guy said, I'm still getting these calls. And I say, well, let me see your dispute letter. Well, he had sent it and he left all the X's in there. And I'm like, no, you have to put your phone number where the X's are. That's just like a placeholder. Okay. So I learned after that, like, make it very clear. So, delete this, don't send it with this. And if you're not sending to Innovis, just delete it. If you're not sending it to SageStream, just delete it. Now you can obviously use other credit bureaus. I think somebody asked about like CoreLogic and LexisNexis and SageStream. Yeah, any credit bureau. And look, there are hundreds and hundreds of credit bureaus. Most are specialty credit bureaus. Okay, we're just focusing really on these 5 right now, and really mainly these 3. So again, we make it very simple for them. Here's the correct information. That's that correct bucket. Here's that middle bucket. It used to be correct, but now it's wrong. So we have that. Okay. And we explain, I don't want people using these old addresses. I don't want identity theft. I don't want phone numbers, being used, or places of employment that I used to work. And then here's the stuff that was never correct. Okay. And then we'll say, now there are errors with the bankruptcy listed. So again, this is just sort of placeholder for what we'll do in the next session. But that's the concept of it. Let me get you these 2 documents here. So you should see this where it will pop up the biographical tool. Okay, so I see some people clicking on that. And I think I can, I'll tell you what, I'm going to wait just a moment before I share the next one. I think I can share it 2 at one time, but I don't want to sort of mess it up here. So I'll give everybody a few more moments to click on this Word document here. And then we'll have the actual letter that you can download. So I'll go ahead and drop that in as well. Okay, so it looks like we can have both these up at the same time. So just click on those, save them. And if you have any problems with them, just email me and we can go through that. Again, the concept is you take your credit reports that you've already pulled and you're just literally copying and pasting into this Word document, into the tool, okay? And just for each area of biographical information, so name, date of birth, social, address, phone number, place of employment. And once you have it all in there from all 3 bureaus, and you'll notice in the letter here that I send my letters to all 3 bureaus. Okay, so I don't have like an Equifax letter and then an Experian letter. It's just more complicated to split them up, and there's a greater chance of an error. I mean, I can't tell you the number of people that say, prepare these beautiful letters, and it turned out I mailed the Experian one to Equifax and the Equifax to TransUnion. You know what? Make it easy. Okay, it's the identical letter. And we'll cover this in another session, but you just print these out. It doesn't matter what envelope you stuff them in because they're all the same, okay? And so I don't distinguish on the personal data between like, well, hey, Equifax, you're listing 567 Main Street, and that's wrong, but TransUnion, I just dump it all in there, okay? On my reports, I see some of this information. It used to be correct, but now it's not. Or this was never correct, and it was always wrong. I want it deleted. So once you sort of dump all this data onto this tool, then you kind of put the credit reports aside, okay? Because if you've done it, and again, the advantage of copying and pasting is it minimizes errors, okay? And so we don't want to, ironically, like mistype something and then say, hey, I'm disputing this, and it's really our error. So if you can, copy and paste all this, and then once you have it there, then you just say, okay, which of these, all these listed are correct, and just copy and paste them. Well, which of these are wrong now, but they used to be correct? And then when you have all this done, I just have a separate page for each of these items here. Let me go back to the chat here. I think everybody's had that. And yeah, Eric says, I assume that you don't just type correct name. That's right. And Kate says, do we need an actual signature? We'll get to that when we get a little bit later. You can, if you're printing them out, nothing wrong with signing it. If you're sort of uploading them, again, you can sign, but you don't have to sign them. There's nothing magical. It says a letter has to be signed. Let's see. Joan says, do we send a separate letter to each credit bureau? So and you may have typed that before I started talking about it. We have this one letter. Okay. So let me go back to our letter. And this letter, you just print it out multiple times or make a PDF and you send this one to Equifax and this one to Experian, but everybody's getting the same information. Okay. And this will really make sense when we get into the credit accounts that we're disputing, because a large part of what we're disputing, I'll just give you kind of the quick preview, is, so imagine, you've got 5 negative accounts on your credit reports. And there's a little bit of different data on each bureau. So what we want to do is for each of those accounts, we want to think in 2 ways. One is external to the credit reports. Okay, so my Capital One says I was late June 2018, 30 days. Well, how do I prove that that's wrong? Well, I've got to go external to the credit reports, right? I got the credit reports here. I go external. So I look at my bank accounts, or I look at, did I transfer some money to Capital One? So there's no way to disprove that unless I have that proof outside the credit reports, okay? But then the second way is we look internally. So we say, well, wait a minute. Equifax says I was 30 days late, but Experian says I was current. Well, they both can't be right, okay? Or even within the same bureau, Equifax says the date of first delinquency is June 2018, and I look at the payment history, it says June 2018 current. Well, that's inconsistent, okay? So the reason we keep these letters with all the bureaus in them is when we get to the accounts, we're going to say, now TransUnion, you say this, but Experian, you say that. Well, which one is it? So it's just so much easier to sort of keep all in one letter that goes to each credit bureau. Let's see. Joseph talks about, your full legal name, social, date of birth. Yeah, that's enough of an identifier. And remember also in the last session, I talked about you can close your driver's license, a utility bill. That gives them everything that they need. And so Michael says, what would I do with a G. Watts John? I would dispute that because that's not my name. And that's somebody writing it backwards, right? Okay. Or maybe, Watts G. John. I guess that would be technically backwards. But I would dispute it and say, my correct name is John G. Watts. This has never been my name. My name has never been, G. Watts John. Okay. So when you look at all this and you have the tool that, and again, there's nothing magical about this tool. I hit the wrong button there. Nothing magical about this. It's just a way to organize it. And trust me, I have tried every possible way. For a long time, I would just sit there with my dispute letter open and just sort of look back and forth. What happens is you end up missing things, okay? And it's better to just sort of take your time. And it doesn't take much time. This thing will take you maybe 10 or 15 minutes max to get it on this tool. And then when you have it on tool, it makes writing the dispute letter so much easier and so much better. And, it's sort of like if you saw me and I said, hey, I'm going on a trip to Florida, and they say, well, do you have enough gas? And I go, yeah, I got like 20 miles worth of gas. And you're like, well, you should stop at a gas station. I go, no, I don't have time for that. You're like, well, John, the 4 hours you're going to wait for a tow truck, you'd be better off spending 10 minutes getting gas now. Same thing here. Just take a few moments, get it on this tool, and then I promise you, it'll make it so much easier when you go to write this, because you're just looking at the tool. You go, okay, here's my correct name. Now, again, you may have to change, remember from English class, you might change an is to an are, something like that. But this will make it so much easier for you, okay? And the way I have the tool set up, it's in the same, Times New Roman 12 size. Now, when you copy and paste stuff in from PDF, sometimes it'll get a little weird. Just, sort of do a, like imagine this came in as, what's some font here? and it came in this size, we'll just like hit Control A, select all, go Times New Roman 12. And then that way, when you paste it into the dispute letter, it's going to come sort of clean. Okay. So hopefully that makes sense. Let me go back to the slides here. So let's talk about any other Q&A, and let me just flip back through and make sure that I haven't missed any that were previously asked. Okay, so one of the questions was from Courtney. I had a name change. Shall I leave the old name? The way I would do it is if your old name, so I'm just making up, I don't even know your last name. Let's say your name now is Courtney Smith and it used to be Courtney Jones. Well, if, maybe your driver's license still has Courtney Jones, or the credit card company still think of you as Courtney Jones, well, then I would use both names. In other words, if you're kind of using both, well, then I would put both on there. But if you've made sort of a clean break, you're like, hey, my name is Courtney Smith, and I don't want anything in Courtney Jones. And I've, told all my creditors, like, here's my new name. My driver's license has my new name. My utility bills have my new name. And when I say new name, it might be from 10 years ago that you changed it. Then I would be very deliberate and specific about getting rid of the old name. Okay. And look, sometimes people, change their name when they get married and then they get divorced and they're like, I don't want that name at all. Okay. And so I get that. And all I'm saying is be consistent. Let's not tell the credit card companies and, the driver's license place one thing and then tell the credit bureau something else. Okay. We want them doing that sort of stuff. We're the good guys. We don't do that. So let's see. David had asked about maiden name, married name, years matter. Again, the number of years wouldn't really matter to me. It's just, do I still use this maiden name or do I only use this married name or, whatever the case is. And let's see. Let's see. Eric made a comment. He's streamlining. If we're better at protecting us, he'll benefit from us not messing up the validation. Get on. Yeah. So, and I mentioned this in the first session. I have so many people come to me and say, hey, here are my credit reports. Can you help me? And I just really can't. Okay. Now, for Alabama clients who we already represent, yeah, sure, we'll help them. But, I really want this for everybody, including, frankly, my own clients, be able to say, here's how you can do this on your own. And look, if you get it fixed, that's great. It's a wonderful sense of accomplishment when you get this letter from the credit bureau and they're like, we've deleted this, fixed this, deleted that. That's great. If they don't, then you can be in a very strong position to bring a lawsuit against the credit bureaus, against the furnishers, against people that have pulled your credit report without permission. I mean, let me think, yesterday or Tuesday it was, I filed suit against the company for false credit reporting and for illegally pulling our credit report. Okay. We always have cases on illegal credit pulls. Most people don't think about that. Those are valuable cases. Okay. And it's important to hammer these guys when they're pulling our stuff. I mean, imagine if I just walked into your house and like grabbed your wallet, started going through your wallet, going through your filing cabinets, looking through all the files on your computer. I'm like, well, I didn't steal anything. Yeah, but that's a problem. If I don't have permission to do that, or what's called a permissible purpose under the law, then that's a problem. So I want you to know how to do all this so you can get it fixed. And if you can't get it fixed, then you can sue these guys and the disputes have been done the right way. So let me see here if anything else. So CC asks, how do you remove an address from 6 years ago if the bureau says it's being reported active from collection? So again, I would just say that's not my correct address. And, if sometimes they'll tell you, here's the company that's reporting this address. You can also contact that company and say, look, you got the wrong address. Okay. And if it's a collector, I want them to have my correct address because I want them to send me stuff. And if it's legitimate and I need to pay them, I'll pay them. But if they're going to break the law, and they often do, I want to get copies of that. I want to see those letters that are improper. Okay. So this is sort of my model with all this. If I'm being sued, I'm not going to duck service. I would say 75, 80% of the time, we file answers to debt buyer lawsuits before we've ever been served. Okay. And, a lot of people go, that's crazy. Why would you do that? I'm trying to engage these people. Okay. If I'm sued by a debt buyer or an original creditor, I'm in a rush to get to trial. Okay. Which is the opposite of what they think we ought to be doing. They think we ought to be running. No, we're charging towards them because I want to beat them at trial and then sue them. Okay. Same thing. If it's a collector, I want them to have my phone number. I want them to have my address. And, if I tell, and usually it's Experian doing this is not a valid address anymore and they refuse to fix it. Well, is that enough to sue? It depends. But I tell you what, that's a little piece of the puzzle. And then they wouldn't fix this name, and they wouldn't fix this phone number, and they wouldn't delete these inquiries, and they wouldn't fix these 5 things on my Capital One account and these 3 things on my American Express account. And you start putting all that together, and now you've painted a picture that this company doesn't care. And this is something that a judge reading this goes, good grief, this could be me. And how many accidents can there be? They go, well, we accidentally didn't delete that address. We accidentally didn't delete that phone number. We accidentally didn't fix that. Remember, the person wrote my name like G. Watch John. Well, that was just a mistake. Well, when you have a dozen mistakes, it ain't a mistake anymore. Okay. So I can't remember if I used this in the last session. I may have shared this in a video. I know I certainly share this with clients. When we talk about what's the difference between negligence and these are not the same, but some people call it an accident, and willfulness or recklessness. Imagine you're driving through an intersection, you got the green light, and bam, I hit you. I ran the red light. And I go, I'm sorry. It's just an accident. You go, okay. So the cars get towed away. You get a rental car. Next day, you're going through the same intersection. You're kind of looking, green light, you're good. Bam, I hit you again. I'm like, I'm so sorry again. And you're like, good grief, twice, and I'm like, I promise it's an accident. The third day, you're going through the same intersection. Probably should go through a different intersection, but you're going through the same intersection. You got the green light. You come to a stop and you look. You don't see me. Then you gun it across and bam, out of nowhere, I hit you again. You're like, you're trying to kill me. Okay. Well, same thing with the credit bureau. They don't fix this and this and this and this and this and this and that. You see, at some point, it's like, how can this just be mere carelessness? I think you are intentionally not fixing the errors I point out to you. So that's why we want to identify, even phone numbers and places of employment and address, and why it's a huge mistake when people skip the biographical. Look, I'm preaching to the choir because, let me see, I think we've got 40 something people on here. And so obviously you care about this, but I just want to emphasize to you, this is really, really important to fix, for its own sake, but also when you come up with that 1 or 2 negative accounts that they won't fix and there are errors and you sue, it's much better to sue and say, Your Honor, there are 12 things they refuse to fix rather than just 1. Okay, so hopefully that makes sense. Let me see what some other things are. Okay, so here's one. My ex-husband's ex-girlfriend's phone number showing on my report. Well, that would be very annoying. Okay, and I'm sure it is. How could this happen? Probably you had just be my guess, you had either a joint account with your ex-husband, or maybe you were an authorized user, he was an authorized user, and that didn't change after the divorce. And then, he applied for credit and put his girlfriend's number on there. And then that just sort of it's sort of like it creeps in on his report. And then they go, oh, well, you both are joint owners. So then it creeps onto your report. So again, you want to just look at all this. I'll tell you who makes it the easiest typically is TransUnion. I mean, they just list names, addresses, phone numbers, place of employment, date of birth, social, very clearly. Some of the others you have to sort of flip through and find all this, but it's worth doing. Let's see, Victoria, can we get copies of the letter? So yeah, those you should be able to get. If for some reason you had trouble downloading those, let me know. The slides, I don't really send out slides, but there's a replay link that you'll get automatically. And so if there's any particular slide, Eric says using cardstock doesn't help, sort of a smiley face, yeah, there's no special paper or font or anything like that. Let's see, Pandora, what are your thoughts on correcting the same information with CoreLogic, Credco, SageStream, LexisNexis, ARS, all the, yeah, any bureau that you have a report for, it's the same concept. Everything we're talking about is the same. And I think I mentioned this. There is a credit report for truck drivers, just for truck drivers. That's all it's for. It doesn't list Capital One or your mortgage or anything like that. It lists how many times have you have a moving violation? How many times have you had a property damage? How many times have you had a at-fault accident? How about a not at-fault accident? It literally is a credit report for truck drivers. It's the same thing. It's a Fair Credit Reporting Act. Okay. So if I represent a truck driver who had that, or if one of you guys are a truck driver and you have this report and you're looking, it's got incorrect addresses, anything like that, it's the same concept. And same thing when we look at bankruptcies, when we look at inquiries, when we look at original creditor accounts, collection accounts, we're saying what is correct and what is incorrect, and then let's be very specific in disputing that. So let's see here. Eric asks, so on the reports, should we only focus on the negative accounts and not make sure that the positive accounts have no error? No, you should look at the positive accounts. I'll just say, let me give you an example. Let's say I have a 20-year-old Bank of America credit card, never been late on it, but it has some missing data in some of the months. And we'll talk about this when we get to the actual accounts. You could dispute that, okay? I wouldn't dispute that, though, because there's a chance they might just delete the account, and that age of the account is helpful. That could bring my FICO score down. So I don't really mess with positive accounts. Now, if it's not my account, I think I mentioned this one time. There are, I think, like 5 John Watts in Alabama, something like that. There's one that lives about 10 miles from me. He may even have the same initial as me. Well, if they've merged our accounts and he's got a 40-year-old American Express account that's never been late, that's great for me, but I don't want that on my account. Okay. So I just don't really pay much attention to the details of positive accounts unless there's a mistake on there that's hurting me. So hopefully that makes sense. Let's see. Paul asked, on any dispute letters, if I think of something after sending one, how long should I wait? You could just go ahead and resend it, okay, or send the follow-up one. That does give them some extra time gives the credit bureaus extra time. Or you could wait, but I mean, obviously we try and get everything in one letter. And again, we'll talk about this in a future session, but there's this myth out there, like you should only dispute 2 items or 4 items or only 2 or 3 things per item. That's complete garbage, okay? That's from credit repair people who are sending out these sort of form letters that have no level of being specific to them, and they're just garbage letters, okay? And the credit bureaus can recognize them as garbage letters, and so it's a way to try to avoid those letters being flagged. The other thing is, it's awful convenient if the credit repair place is charging you monthly to say, well, now I know you've got 20 negative accounts, but let's just dispute 3 a month. Well, that guarantees like 6 or 7 months, right? I'm saying the normal thing we would do, if I go to, the doctor or the emergency room, I want them to at least identify everything. Okay. Now they may say, well, we got to get your heart started before we fix your pinky toe that's broken. Okay. But here, like, let's list everything. All right. And let's get everything fixed. It doesn't matter how many pages our letter is. And look, truth of the matter is, a lot of the times the credit bureaus will kind of zone out on longer letters. Hey, that's on them. I mean, if I send a letter, going back to, let me pull up this little form dispute letter. And let's say they get to right here and they go, oh, this is too long. I'm not going to read all this. Buddy, that's your problem. Equifax, Experian, TransUnion, Innovis, LexisNexis, SageStream. If you stopped reading my letter because you're too cheap to pay, they're not even employees, but these contractors that process these in foreign countries. And look, typically the amount that they pay is like a quarter, maybe 50 cents to the company, who then pays the workers to do your dispute letters. They're on this like quota. They got to bang these things out really, really quick. And look, if they decide, well, I'm not going to read this letter, and so I'm not going to investigate these, that's not my problem. That's their problem when we're in federal court and they're trying to justify, well, yeah, it's a very plain, clear letter, but we were too lazy to read past page 2. That's a problem. I think I mentioned this. I help people, and this we do nationwide, who have problems with back taxes. Okay, I'm not talking about a small amount, but you owe 50 grand, 100 grand, 500 grand to the IRS. Well, it's no defense for me to go to the IRS and say, hey, you guys sent 3 certified mail letters and they were 3 pages each, and my client could only have time to read the first page. You think the IRS cares about that? So we don't care if the credit bureaus don't read this. We're going to make it simple. We're going to make it understandable. We're going to enclose anything we need to enclose with it. Okay. I mean, I've sent some letters that are like 70 pages long, talking about with attachments. If they choose not to read it, that's on them. So that's a bit of a rant, and that wasn't exactly what Paul asked, but hopefully that helps you, Paul. Let's see. Yeah, Mark asked, can I download letters later? I'm on the road. So for some reason, the replay, and this is new webinar software for me, I don't think it puts the handouts there. I'm going to try and figure that out. But if you can't get them, just email me back. I think you can reply back to any of these automated emails, and then I'll just attach them. And let's see. So somebody asked, not including middle names would be a mistake on a dispute letter. So you don't have to. Some people don't really use their middle name. I don't ever spell mine out. I just use G. And so I would put mine as John G. Watts. Okay. But it's not really a requirement. You just want to make it easy for the credit bureau to identify you. So here's my name, my social, my date of birth, my address. Here's a driver's license. Here's a utility bill. And that will do the trick. Courtney asked, can you omit your residence address for safety reasons? I prefer to use a P.O. box. So here's what I'd say about that, Courtney. On your dispute letter, in terms of saying this is not accurate or I want it removed, if you do live at 123 Main Street, but you don't want that on your credit report, I would just explain that. I'd say, look, I do live here, but I do not use this address for anything. Okay. And I have some safety concerns, maybe, don't make anything up, obviously, but if there have been some past incidents, people sort of stalking you or something, you could put that in. But if not, you just say for safety reasons, and I use my P.O. box for everything. For example, now I don't know in your state if you can use a P.O. box for your driver's license, but if you say here are 5 different, current creditors, and they all, the statements all show my P.O. box, I think that would help. Now, I think the credit bureau has the right to use your current address, your physical address, but they may delete it again if you explain. And you'll notice this is a pattern that really everything we do is, here's what I'm telling you, debt collector, credit bureau, mortgage company, whoever, and here's why I want you to delete it. Okay. So here's what I want you to do. Here's why. You don't have to do that, but it makes it more persuasive. And a judge looking at that says, oh, okay, I see. And so that's what I would do there. Let's see. D asks, I disputed incorrect last 4 social being reported, and the report was updated from 1 social variation to 2. Does this lead to a mixed file? Can we see? So what I would say is a lot of times the credit report will only list the last 4. Okay. And you typically have that option when you sort of pull the credit report. If the last 4 are not correct, then I would dispute it. Okay. Now the way I would dispute it is say, this is my correct number. here's my proof. Here's my social security card. Here's, the page of my 2019, 2020 tax return that lists my social security number. Give them some proof, okay? And if they don't fix it, then yeah, I would certainly look at suing them for that. Now, I would also see, are there other things, okay? And she mentioned about a mixed file, sometimes called a merge file. Sometimes it's called mixed merge. It means there's John Watts and there's this other John Watts, and the files get intermingled. They get mixed. They get merged. So, my date of birth is showing up on the other John Watts credit report. His American Express account showing up on mine. His place of employment showing up on mine. Well, we've got to get those unmerged, okay, unmixed. Those are real problems. And just to give you a little preview, sometimes you don't know whether it's a mixed file or it's identity theft. I mean, there's an account that's not yours. It's on your credit report. Is that identity theft? Is that a mixed file? We don't really know. So in some ways we treat it as identity theft, but we also tell the credit bureaus, look, I don't know why this is on here. If it's identity theft, get rid of it. If you've mixed me with somebody else, get rid of that. Let me share this with you about the data. So imagine there's just a giant room that all the data from Equifax is in there. There's, trillions of pieces of little data there. Each data has, a name on it, a social, a date of birth, okay? So there is no actual credit file. I'm looking to see if I have a folder. I mean, there is no sort of old-fashioned folder, okay? And instead, what happens when they pull your credit report, it's sort of like this giant arm goes into that room and says, all right, let me collect all the bits of data that say John Watts with this social and this date of birth. And then that is your credit report. So if the wrong social gets attached to it, that's why when they go in and grab it, it can appear on somebody else's, or somebody else's can appear on yours. And they don't make this 100%, okay? Because what if a creditor has misspelled my name? Well, they don't want me to not have that mortgage account on my credit report just because there's a typo. So they'll set it at maybe 90% accuracy, maybe 85%. And so when you see somebody else's social on there, you really want to get rid of that and let the credit bureaus know this is not me, because you don't want that ending up, sort of pulling other data in. Remember that one question about how did my ex-husband's ex-girlfriend's phone number appear on my account? We want to keep it pure, keep just our stuff on there, get rid of everybody else's. All right, let's see here. We have Kate says, thank you for the valuable info. You're very, very welcome about that. So here's a question from Darren. We moved to a new state because of COVID, haven't been able to get a new driver's license, sent change of address, confirmation, old driver's license, utility bill from the new city. TransUnion rejected it. They asked for the items above and a copy of my driver's license. So first of all, understand why, and you probably do, but let me just, for everybody else, let me just explain why the credit bureaus are so eager to reject letters. Because when they receive a dispute letter from you, first of all, if it's by just regular mail, they can just kind of throw it away. You can't prove that they received it. But let's say you send it certified, so they get it. Now, what do? Well, at this level, they have two choices. They can say, we're going to investigate, which means they've got to then process it. They've got to get it to their outsourced people in the Philippines or Colombia or Pakistan or wherever they are to do the dispute. And then they have to mail you a letter back and they have to deal with all this, okay? Or they can reject it. Now they might say, well, this is frivolous, or we don't think this is really you. See, that's an easy one. And so I'll give you an example. I had Experian used to be notorious about this. They still are to some extent. But we send a dispute letter. Here's my name, social, date of birth, blah, blah, blah. Here's my driver's license, utility bill. We get back a form letter from Experian saying, hey, we don't think this really came from you. We're worried about you. We need you to send us a letter with your driver's license and a utility bill. Well, we already sent that. So we just took the old letter, and because it sort of amused me. I had the client just write across top of it, "This is my second and final notice to you." They wrote it in red, kind of like a collection letter. And so we sent that. And then they sent us same form letter back. So we sued them and said, "You did a lousy investigation." They said, "No, we didn't do any investigation. You didn't send us your driver's license, your utility bill." So yeah, we sent it to you twice. And they're like, "Oh, well, we get such a high volume. You can't really expect." I'm like, "Yeah, actually, I do expect you to do this right. You're keeping a credit report on me. I never gave you permission to keep a credit report. I have no right to forbid you to keep a credit report, but I do have the right to make sure that you investigate my disputes." And so we sued them for that. And, it worked out very well. So, Darren, I would say for you, if you didn't explain it in the first letter, then I would explain it in detail. Like, here's when I lived in, Tampa, Florida. Here's where I moved to Austin, Texas. Here's maybe you shut off the utilities down in Tampa. I think Telco is the name of the, or TECO, sorry. TECO is the name of the utility. And so if you call them, they'll usually email you something saying you started service on this date, ended it here. Well, when I moved to Austin, I started renting an apartment. Here's my lease. Here's where I turned on the water, the gas, the power. You see what I'm saying? If you can't, because of COVID, if you can't go and get your new license, I would just explain. You want to remove all excuses from these guys, okay? And if they reject it once, there's a chance they'll reject it twice. And if you have legitimate, actual disputes on actual errors and they reject it, that's on them. That's a problem for them. So let's see. Joan says, "Have a credit card, lowered my limit based on information from a credit report. Credit report company says it's credit card company pulling the report. Credit card company says the bureau provides the report. Who is correct?" Well, they're really both correct. So, if I have Capital One, it reaches out every month. It has a right to do this to my credit bureaus. And that's what's called an account review. It doesn't hurt my score. So they're going and getting it, but also the bureau is providing it to them. So they're both doing it. And usually what you've described is maybe I have something negative going on, or I'm maxed out on my Capital One card, and Discover says, "Woo, we're kind of worried about that. So we're going to lower your limit," which can then set off kind of a chain reaction. So again, this is why we want everything to be accurate. We don't want a bad address to cause a creditor to get nervous, or, incorrect balance is listed. And again, we'll get to that, but this is why we want to correct all errors on our credit report. And so let's see. And Eric had mentioned here about, you can use back to the P.O. box, you can say "in care of." Again, I don't think we can make the credit bureau not use our physical address, but again, I would just sort of explain it. Let's see. Somebody says, "All this time I thought the list of prior addresses employers was proper reporting. Didn't know until now I should dispute it. Thanks for enlightening me." Well, you're very welcome. And I'll say this. It's not that it's, how can I say this? It's not that it's just absolutely wrong to list a prior address, because they do put on their prior address. Now, sometimes they mess it up, okay? But I'm just saying that you can dispute those old addresses, particularly like old phone numbers. I worked at McDonald's when I was 16. I'm 50 years old now. Like, why does that need to be on my credit report? Okay. And so just explain why you don't want this on there. And so I've tried to do that in this letter, and you're welcome, obviously, modify the letter however you want. So it's a good exercise to go through to look at all this data, because I can almost guarantee you there are at least going to be a few things that go in that third bucket. Remember, this is correct now, not correct, but used to be, and then never was correct. There will be some things in this bucket. Your name will be misspelled. Look, my name's pretty easy. If you have a Hispanic name, they just constantly mess that up. If you've changed your name, they'll revert, like your maiden name will be your first name, and it's just amazing what they'll do. Again, any sort of name that is, not Bob Smith, okay? There's a chance that that's going to be messed up. The creditor may have messed it up, So you are from South Korea, and you have a Korean name and the creditor messes that thing up, well, then that gets put into your credit report. Other creditors see that, they may change your name. So it's worth it to really, really be precise. Again, like John, how can you mess that up? Well, they do. They put Jon. They put Jonathan. My legal name is not Jonathan. It's not Jon. If they mess that up, like, isn't John like the most common name in the US? Then what are they doing if you have a little bit unusual name or a different spelling? Let's say your name is Kelly. Well, how do you spell Kelly? Is it Kelly? Some people. Is it Kelli? Some people. Kelley? Kellie? Those are all very, I mean, not that there's a valid way, however your name is spelled, that's valid. But those are common ways of spelling Kelly. Well, if you're Kelley and they left out the E, I would dispute that. That's not your name, okay? You know, my name is Watts, my last name. If you take off the S, that's not my last name. So I would just be very, very precise with them and make them get it correct. Because, I mean, you don't want your name spelled wrong. I used this in a video a few days ago. You know, if you get a birthday cake that you paid for your son or your wife or your husband or your grandmother, whoever, and they misspell their name, we're not like, no big deal, they misspelled. No, you know, I paid whatever, $40 for this cake. I want my name spelled correctly. I want my kid's name spelled correctly. You know, we have a right to have our name used correctly, is my point. Same thing with addresses and all that. So let's see. So somebody's asking about pulling credit reports. We'll talk about that next week. And is there a link to the first webinar, getting the reports? Yes, I will. Let me see if I can actually pop that up here. We're going to try this. So yeah, you should be able to click on this. If it works, it should open up like a new window or a new tab in your browser. And then, you know, I think you have to click play to make it start. So hopefully that will work. If Michael, that does not work for you, just email me and I'll send that to you. And I'll give you, there's a couple of handouts we had in that. So if you don't have those, again, just email me and I'll send those to you. You'll see them in the video, but I don't think on the replay you can get them, but I'll email them to you if you just email me. Let's see. Eric mentions Lexis has an insurance report. And here's the thing about LexisNexis. You can get LexisNexis reports that will be like 200 pages long. Okay. This is a slight exaggeration, just barely. It'll have the name of your neighbor's dog. Okay. I mean, they have everything on there. So again, it's worth going through. We're learning a process. So let me share this with you. There's sort of an expression that you go to law school to learn how to think like a lawyer. What does that mean? Well, we don't go to law school just to learn the rules so that we can pass the bar. Okay. Honestly, if you are a motivated student, you did pretty well in college, we could probably take you, and in 6 months of full-time study, you could probably pass the bar. Doesn't mean you'd be a good lawyer. It just means you know the rules. But what law school teaches you is to understand sort of what's the rationale beneath the rule, okay? And then how do we, when we deal with new stuff, we go, I don't exactly know that, but I have all this knowledge of how other courts handle other situations so I can predict what will happen here. Well, again, going through this, I want you to learn not just how to, have a dispute letter at the end of this. I mean, we could get software, and a friend of mine's making some software, and we'll see how good it is. And frankly, I have some stuff that sort of automates this, but I don't want you just to say, well, I don't know what caused this letter to pop up. I don't know why I'm disputing this. No, that's no good. Okay. Because then you're in a lawsuit and they're going, well, why did you dispute this? You're like, I have no earthly idea. Not a good answer. Okay. So I want you to understand the concept behind how do we dispute false information? And then whatever pops up. Okay. So like public records. Right now, judgments are not showing up, at least 99% of the time, are not showing up on Equifax, Experian, TransUnion. Tax liens are not showing up on Equifax, Experian, TransUnion. They may show up on LexisNexis. They may show up on another report. But what we're going to learn in the next session about bankruptcies, okay, that's the public record that shows up. Well, how do we look at that? How do we dispute that? You may not have a bankruptcy, but on your LexisNexis, you have a judgment. Well, now you know the concept, the rationale for how to dispute. So that's the reason we're going through all this is I want you to learn how to do that. Even if you get somebody else to do it, at least you can know if they're doing it the right way. And I said this last time, nobody will care more about your credit reports than you will. Okay. So you can hire somebody and, there are some people that are good out there, but they're never going to give it the attention that you would give it. I mean, it just makes sense, right? You can't pay somebody $100 a month to dispute errors and think they're going to spend hours and hours and hours on your stuff. That's not a good business model. All right, let's see. Melanie asked, where can I find information on additional credit reporting agency? If you go to the CFPB website, actually, if you just Google, let me see, actually, maybe I can, let's see here if we can just pull this up. All right, so CFPB list of consumer reporting agencies. So I'll drop this link in also. Yeah, so this will be it. Let me see here. I think I can do it this way. List of other credit reporting agencies. So if this works, get these reports now. Okay, so you should be able to click on that. That should take you to what's on the screen. And then you just download this PDF and they update this. You can see it was updated in 2021, 38 pages. If we just say rent, well, let me just put rentals. Yeah, so here's TrueWork, and it gives you the website, the phone number. If your employer uses TrueWork, verify your employment and income when applying for loans, jobs, apartment rentals. There's just all sorts of things. See if they may not list the trucking one, but like insurance. Yeah, so here's, A+ property by Verisk, so they tell you, they'll give you a free report every 12 months. Here's a website, here's a phone number. So it's a really valuable thing. I mean, there's medical, you have credit reports on your medical stuff. You have credit reports on, claims, homeowners claims. So I would definitely look at that. It's a great question, Melanie. And again, what we're doing in this webinar series, you can apply to anything. Okay, so you've got an entry on so cashing checks or writing checks. That's pretty long-standing credit bureau. They have something false on there. Well, how do you dispute it? Well, you'll know how to dispute it. It's the same thing as if American Express or Midland Funding or anybody else has false credit reporting. So let's see. Oh, and Darren mentioned, yeah, CFPB keeps a list. So thanks, Darren. Victoria asked about bankruptcy, and we'll talk about that. Victoria asked about removing a repo in the history. And again, when we get to actually digging into the negative accounts, we'll talk about all that. Is it hard trying to keep up with all the bureaus? Do you have special filing system you use? Other than this, I would just use Google Drive, use Dropbox, something like that. What's the Microsoft OneDrive or something? And I would just make a folder like credit reports, and then make another folder that, either by date or by bureau, and just list them in there. And then, when you go to dispute, and you'll see this particularly when we get to the negative accounts, using a spreadsheet, it really makes it easy to keep track of it. I wanted to use this Word document because it's just right now it's the easiest thing, and I don't want to overcomplicate this. So, but when we get to the accounts, we'll use a spreadsheet, And again, I'll give you all that. So that'll be easy to use. Yeah, Carlene asked about disputed account and collections, but there are some inaccurate payments maybe being made, or maybe they're accurate. So again, we'll talk about all that. Kate talks about hers will be a book. Yeah, don't worry about how long it is. I don't ever send anything to the credit bureaus they don't need, but I also don't mind sending them 40 or 50 pages. And again, if they choose not to look at my attached documents, then they can stand in front of a federal judge and explain why they were too lazy to look at them. And, just sort of get the popcorn and just kind of watch. Like, this will be fun. Let's see how they explain this. Let's see. Darren talks about how long bankruptcy will stay on there. And there's some different things with bankruptcy. So here's one about, just if they, don't get your name right, why it's important. So I don't want to mention the full name here, but you definitely want to get your name taken care of. And let's see, in the doc on the page, it's missing not before longer work here. Okay, so you try to let's see. Oh, I see. Yeah, down here. So just if you'll make that change, and good eye for catching that. I tried to make this correct and remove all typos, but I did tell you guys you were sort of the beta group, so thank you for helping me to catch that, and I'll make sure and fix that on the kind of the real version here. So some reason there. All right, so thank you again, Eric, for that. So let's see. Kate talks about synchrony. So yeah, we'll definitely talk about that. And so William says have an E8 violation that we were talking about on Zoom. Okay, so yeah, just get with me privately on that, William. And Darren asked, should we start sending them out now? I would wait. We're going to be, the next session will be bankruptcy inquiries. And obviously when this is in just sort of the training course, people could, watch them back to back to back. What I find though is that when I would tell people to, well, let's jump right into something else, they end up skipping over this biographical stuff. And to me, I would send it all at once, just so you've got one big letter. It's got all the information in there. And it makes it super easy if there is litigation to say there was one dispute letter sent and you guys didn't fix it, rather than the bureau's going, I don't know what he was doing. He sent us like 3 different letters a week at a time and it was confusing. It's all bogus, but I like just one letter and, it just boom, 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 all these things. So that's the approach I take. Let's see here. So you guys are very kind, so I appreciate your kind comments here. Let's see. Kate says, is there a way to find out which reporting agencies report on you instead of looking at the individual ones? So like putting in your social and you see all the agencies, not that I'm aware of, Kate. So, really you just have to go to each of these places. Now, Equifax, Experian, TransUnion, almost always SageStream, almost always Innovis, almost always LexisNexis. Some of these specialty ones, you just have to kind of experiment with them. So what I do for this sort of stuff is, don't do this. If you're like a morning person full of energy, your mind is sharp, like don't do this in the morning, do this in the afternoon when you're like tired. You know what? I can barely do this, but I can call this place and, or I can go online and almost always they'll mail you a report and then just see what you get. And sometimes they send you something that says, we have no file on you. Okay. But like if you've rented, you maybe had a problem with the landlord, or the landlord was just weird, you might get one that, covers rentals. If you've had weird things about, doctors and hospitals, you might, check out, the one that sort of tracks some of your medical history. Or again, if you've had insurance claims, So you can kind of figure out which ones probably apply to you. And so Eric says, I'm a nerd on spelling and grammar. Well, good. That's, it's important. And I am, and here's the crazy thing. It looks like, I should have caught that. So thank you for catching that. Let's see. And Eric, left out the and just to illustrate, about spelling and grammar. So I appreciate you doing that, Eric. And Kate says, makes so much sense as one letter. Let's see. Don says, hi, I just had Experian finally removed 5 versions of my name. But my name is Don Archibald II on my birth certificate. How do I report it as, 2 I's instead of junior or 2? So they may report it with the number 2, okay? But there definitely is a difference between being a second and a junior. At least as I understand, typically a junior is like your dad was, Don Archibald. But if you're the second, maybe it was your uncle was Don Archibald, and you're the second. So I would definitely fuss at them about the junior, and maybe just ask them. It may be they say it's just not, their system doesn't really allow like the 2 I's. I mean, obviously they can print capital I's, but I would just ask them about that. So Courtney says, thank you very much, and you're welcome. And well, listen, guys, I think that's all in the way of chats, and I actually went a little longer than I intended. Appreciate you guys sticking around here with me. I'd say we still have a number of people on here. Let's see, Cece, why do old addresses come back on your report? So sometimes it's because a creditor is sort of supplying that information. Remember I said there's sort of like, imagine a giant room full of all these bits of data. Well, every month Discover Card sends some data and it has my name and my old address. So I would want to correct that with Discover, and usually just go online, update your personal information, and they'll stop doing that. The Bureau should not allow that to come back, but sometimes they do. So again, sort of you have to, every situation is different. Would we sue them for just doing that? Probably not, but also depends. Have we told them repeatedly? Have we told Discover repeatedly, or whoever's supplying that? So if it comes back, you might emphasize to them, look, you deleted this on a letter dated April the 13th, 2021. I disputed this. Results of investigation dated May 15. You agreed to delete it, and now it's popped back up June. I'm not disputing it after this last time. Do not let this come back up. And they can stop it, or what's called suppress it, and that can help there. And so, okay, guys, well, listen, you have a fabulous day. Everybody should get, once this is sort of the replay is processed, you should get an automated email with the replay if you want to go back. If you need any of these handouts or any of this information, just shoot me an email and I'll be happy to send it to you. So you guys have a wonderful day, and I will see you next week. Okay. Thanks a lot, guys. Bye-bye.